afternoon to all of you. I welcome to the Day 2 invited talk session. Today's first invited talk will be given by Dr. A. Shesh Kumar Garu. He is the Chief Scientist Head, Product Development and Project Engineering Division from IIT. I welcome you, sir, for this session. I would like to introduce sir. He is going to deliver a talk on role of mechanical engineering in the domain of chemistry and chemical engineering. Sir has done his PhD, MTech, BTech with mechanical engineering with specialization in production engineering. He has got 31 years of experience in applied research, prototype development, project engineering associated with R&D. His doctorate from IIT Kharagpur, obtained master's degree from IIT Mumbai. He served CSR laboratories in various capacities. Currently holds the position of Chief Scientist at IIT Hyderabad. Worked on several collaborative projects as project principal investigator, project leader. Focus of research has been on science and technology of welding and mechanical engineering domain of chemical science and technology. Current research interests include computational welding mechanics, development of prototypes for R&D applications, additive manufacturing, mechanochemistry, thermochemical conversion, biomasses. He also experienced in providing crucial managerial engineering CPM support to R&D and several other activities to the industry. He has published more than 20 papers in peer-reviewed journals and presented 50 papers in international conferences. Guided about 20 students for their MTech dissertation, presently guiding 2 students in PhD. I think 10 students. I welcome you sir for this session. Sorry now sir, thank you very much.
Very good afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure for me to be once again in front of all of you. Generally, I made it like a kind of the reflection of myself. What I've been like, because many times people question me, as a mechanical engineer, what will you do in a chemistry lab? This is one big question we keep facing. So normally you see the mechanical engineers are like Sarvantariyam, like we are there everywhere. So like here, what I am trying to give is the kind of interdisciplinary activities that where we as a mechanical engineer we made inroads into the chemistry and chemical engineering, and then we are trying to contribute to the society through our various activities. It may be through the engineering support or through the R&D activities. I just try to take you a brief spectrum of activities that currently I am involved, and some part of it which I have at my talk activity, which is part of the work which I am currently I am doing. This will give you bird's eye view of the activities that goes on. See, when I mean, like basically my scheme of presentation will be like this. Like I talk about what is our department, what we are doing, and then as I associate mechanical engineering with the synthesis of chemical reactions, and then what as an engineer, mechanical engineer, particularly when you don't like chemistry, so then what is the scope where you have and what you can do. So I'll try to take you to the development of greener technologies for extraction of vegetable oils through mechanochemical processing. And finally, we try to do something which is very interesting as a mechanical engineer, where we generally try to do mathematical modeling of various flows, stresses. What I am doing as a intervention to the grassroots innovations, I try to cover as a last part. So let me tell you what I am, my department. My department is I provide electrical services and the utility services like steam, air, water, all those. I mean, like, generally a chemical laboratory that is required. We also provide design services for the complete institute development, particularly when it comes to the construction and then when the organization of the facilities. But as a mechanical engineer to live like a Roman in Rome. Because what are the scope that we have as a mechanical engineer, what I have in front of me. One of the simplest thing was the mechanochemistry, where we use the understanding of mechanical engineering, particularly the high energy milling activities that we generally do for various particularly metal. It is very prevalent in the field of metallurgy, where we do look at the size reduction as one of the important aspects. So we try to associate ourselves where the high energy milling or high energy using mechanical energy for applying that for conversion of chemical species into various products. It may be when I'll give you in detail about it as I come. This is what exactly I am doing as a mechanical engineer in a chemistry lab. Similar question I faced when I was at the National Metallurgical Laboratory as a metallurgist. What is the role that I have? So I chose the field of welding at that particular point of time. I worked for almost like 15 years in the various, particularly welding and welding metallurgy, welding integrity assessment, and then particularly fracture mechanics applied to the design and design of welded joints. And then, of course, as a mechanical engineer, I had a big department of refrigeration air conditioning. So we try to look a small activity because there are people who want to do something in that area. So I try to guide the people. And then one area which is, where I merged the electrical engineering and the particularly refrigeration, we were trying to develop some solar power utilities. As a part of it, we developed a solar powered air conditioner in our institute, and then actually we tried to look at it as a particularly for the comfort air conditioning applications as a business initiative at IIC. Okay, another thing which I said is the engineering interventions to the grassroots innovations. So these are the facilities generally what I hold at my institute, at my department. We have a Z800 CAD workstation to do the mathematical modeling. So of course some softwares that we have like MATLAB, MathCAD. Then of course when I'm looking at various modeling activities, I need to have a sensors. So I need to acquire. So one of the things which I looked at is the pressure sensors, which are which were needed for my work, which we acquired. Then for doing particularly the mechanochemistry activity, I need particle size reduction and particle size reduction mills, such of thing. So we have a conventional accretion mill, vibration mill, and then when we are doing the reactions. Further down, what are these solid liquid separation or the solid separations that we need to do? So various centrifuges. Then analysis, again we have a gas chromatograph. At this moment, one of the very interesting thing which we are trying to do at my institute is the gasification of biomasses. And this, in fact, I must thank this institute for because there was an activity which was continued. And then I happened to be, I think, one of those BOS member. When research thesis, I think someone it was referred for the BOS, or I think other member. So there, I saw the potential when I was going through that particularly the work submitted by the student. So as a mechanical engineer, what is requirement? So in fact, IICT at one point of time was a big name for gasification. So we tried to, particularly we have taken risers as a starting up, but this is not the focus of my presentation today. Of course, as I said, it is a central workshop. We have all machining, fabrication with me, and they are working in the biomass gasification area. And then there are 5 active, there are about 10-15 students registered with me from mechanical engineering, from OU particularly, but there are 5 active students working. And now some of them are very close to submission of their. Now I just tries to give you a bird's eye view of what is mechanochemistry, what is this as a green synthesis route we can conceive for chemical reactions. Now particularly when we see as a mechanical engineer, when we apply high energies, what happens is the matter undergoes a shear deformation, particularly when you look at the ball milling or other, where we try to create defects in the material. Though the elevated state is the activated state, where the matter is ready to associate itself at low energy with other materials. So these are, and with this particular activity, what we can do is, particularly this is mostly related in the area of solid state reactions or solid state changes that we see. Particularly the reactions can be between solids and solids, or solids and liquids, or solids and gases. So mechanochemistry provides the principle of the chemical interactions and conversions in solids under mechanical influence. Especially when we refer to the reactions involved in any state of aggregation, although mostly present when we, this is this particular area is about, say, maybe about 20-25 years old in the world, and fathers of mechanics, particularly the Russian groups, Professor Lomonosky and other, there are plenty of the mechanical alloy that we do look when we look at the dispersion state. When we look at the transition state, where the chemical reactions that we basically are looking at. So when we do the mechanical alloying, or when we use the particularly metals, where only the diffusion, associated diffusion is the most important criteria. It is mechanical activation. We have particularly when the diffusion is particularly the limits limited by the temperature or by the solubility of the material, but we can overcome the solubility limits by applying the mechanical energy. Diffusion can be, and then particularly metastable compounds and structures can be brought down and may be made stable at the room temperature. This is one of the very pertinent and very popular application people try, and many of the mechanical engineers, the metallurgists, they use this particular field. But normally when we look at the chemical reaction part of it, we apply the kinetics of the solid state chemical reactions, and particularly the redox reactions are the ones which we are focusing. Now, particularly when we are applying the mechanochemistry, the reactions that require high temperatures, normally at the highly dispersed, high energy state, we can bring down those reactions, and that is the reason when we do the mechanical alloying, the components which are unstable at the higher temperatures, particularly the solid solutions and those things, they can be made realize those particular metastable phases at the room temperature. And particularly the reaction times also can be brought up. And then one of the stepping stone or starting step is the nanocrystalline materials, that what we see when we do this size reduction. And this is one of the most important attributes of excuse me, the mechanochemistry or the mechanochemical processing, and particularly when the chemistry, when I am trying to sell this particular idea to the chemist, what I told him is these are the things. Like what are all the things that are possible? Organic synthesis is possible, mainly particularly the kind of halogenation or esterification, acetylation reactions, they can be easily realized, and some of the bioactives, particularly when we look at and when we are dealing with the natural products, those the ranges, I mean, like the actives which can be realized from the processes can be higher than normally that what we can use with the traditional. I'll give you an example. Normally when we look at this another area is the molecular sieves, when particularly when we are looking at the energy storage, particularly fuel cells. So these are the things particularly very useful when we are trying to do some of the developments or for the energy storage devices. So these are some of the things that we can see. And further down, like originally it was the mechanochemistry was envisaged for the hydrometallurgy or the production of particularly construction materials, where we want to reduce particularly waste materials. So for waste materials, when it comes to either the materials which are offshoot of the construction activities, like the cement industry, where the lot of dust, those things, then further the value added products that can become fertilizers, one of the important area where the reception of the particularly the nitrogen compounds into the soil are much easier when they are in the activated states. Another the areas like the catalyst, functional ceramics, these are the things, pharmaceutics where the production of medicines, particularly one area, one example people keep quoting is that, for example, when we take a paracetamol tablet, we take a 650 mg tablet, but when you act mechanically, when you do through the mechanochemistry route, you can bring it down to a 50 mg which will do the same activity which can be done at because of the higher state of the energy or the activity that it can render, particularly the materials. So particularly another area is the treatment of clay minerals. One of my colleague was working particularly development of ceramics in that area. And some of the potential applications, I think I can go down. But one example which I try to tell you is the solvent shakedown. The solvent shakedown is one of the, normally the chemistry people generally know that solvent extraction is a very popular area when whatever you want to extract from a synthesis, whatever you want to do. One immediate step you do is put a solvent. Put solvent normally, the ranges at which we take is, these are the solvents which are particularly the range. I mean, like these are one is carcinogenic, second is highly inflammable, and the ranges at which you take will be 1:6. And when you look at that, you can bring down the solvent usage when you use the mechanochemistry route, and then maybe instead of 1:6, maybe it can bring down to 1:2, 1:3 level. So it is a substantial reduction. That is one area, and particularly when we are dealing with nanoparticles, nanotoxicity is one thing. So people generally use the solvent chemistry as part of this as an offshoot into that. Now, as just generally give you what it can do. A traditional method. Now, many of you, if you are known to use the homeo medicines, econite medicine is one which is it undergoes for the extraction of the medicinal product, and the traditional route will give you about 0.3 bioactives. And when you pass through the mechanochemical approach, it can improve to the bioactive yield can improve to 1.3%. So this is one of the, I mean, you can see the amount of scale at which improves. So this is one very popular thing. Similarly, I gave some examples of various bioactives that can be improved to this. And okay, for every subject has its own advantages, and this is not something which is not without its own difficulties. One of the key problems in this particular area is scaling up. Because when we are looking at the high energy reactions, high energy mills, and here many of them comes into the batch process which can be handled at maybe 5 liters per hour in terms of the volume, or 1 kg or 2 kg, 3 kg. But when you are looking at the industrial scale, this is one of the big standard limitations are being posed by it. Then the mechanics of the construction of the mills itself is a big challenge, because I try to give you the example which what we have faced. I share that particular aspect at that time. Now, when we look at who are the major people who are working in this field, when it comes to India, there are two institutes, National Metallurgical Laboratory, where I was earlier associated, and ARCA, Advanced Research Center for Powder Metallurgy and New Materials. These are the two laboratories. Again, I associate with ARCA for some of the activities, and these are the two people. There are two big research groups working in the field of mechanochemistry, green synthesis of products. When we look as a mechanochemistry, as a mechanical engineer in a chemistry lab, I see it as an opportune area rather than as a burden. So in fact I try to, that's why I took myself. And because since I fear chemistry, so I try to take it to the area where there are not much of chemical reactions that are involved. So I try to give you. Generally, if we look at what is the estimated cost of setting up a mechanochemistry laboratory, easily, as a simple laboratory with small mills, the minimum investment will be somewhere around 5 crores. I just gave a general estimate. So now I try to come to the specifics of what I wanted to share. of what I have been doing. Now, we all know that vegetable oils are the mainstay for our living, and almost like global production is 135 million metric tons, and we have India's requirement is now close to touches about 8 million metric tons, and we 80% of the all vegetable oils they go into food application, and 6% goes into the animal feed. About of course 14% goes to the production of oil-related chemicals. But when we see, particularly in India, when we see the particularly Indian context, we are the second biggest foreign exchange outgo after petroleum products is the vegetable oils in India. So there is a huge amount of requirement for developing both looking at the tree bone seeds for the development of vegetable oils, or anything which is available as some amount of oil and bringing it to the edible conditions. So this is very huge requirement. I just try to share some figures. Of course, I am quoting some of the older data. We are about like the domestic oil production is about 7.8, and we import 5.6 million metric tons of oils every year by the country. And these are the various components of like what are all the edible oil seeds, and then their contribution in terms of production. So now when we look at this vegetable oil seed processing, traditionally there are two techniques. There are other many techniques that have come. They will take a shape, and they are like fly-by-night operators. They are vanishing. Of course, I am also presenting a thing which at this moment is maybe it will appear as a fly-by-night operator, but as a mechanical engineer, but I am trying to take it further. So, but when we traditionally look, what is the mechanical experiment? So, the mechanical engineer has definitely a very big role to play in the extraction of vegetable oils, and the second is the chemists or chemical engineers who do the solvent extraction. The other, as I said, other techniques which are extension of enzymatic extraction, supercritical extraction, these are all something extensions of whatever are being done as in the field of solvent extraction. So normally when we see the existing current oil seeds, these are like groundnut. I mean, first step is the mechanical extraction. Second is the solvent extraction. So first, normally when the oil seed oil content of the oil seed is more than 40%, 35-40%, the first step that comes to our mind is to go for apply mechanical energy, and then extract the vegetable oil. As simple as gunnies, the olden days what we are aware of, gunny extraction, and then which is now extended into a continuous extraction process through a mechanical expeller, where a simple screw like an extruder, the seed mass is extruded over a screw between a barrel and cage, and then the mechanical energy will expel the oil. And then further down, when the de-oil mill which contains extra oil, that undergoes by the solvent extraction. Now, as I said, the modern traditional methods are the oil gunnies, mechanical expelling, and solvent extraction. Modern extraction techniques will be like supercritical or enzymatic or ultrasound assisted. All, say for example, ultrasound we are aware. We use in and out ultrasonics for machining, welding kind of thing, and it is nothing new. Even when it comes to because it's a mechanical energy we apply. Actually, why we should look at the vegetable oil extraction from the mechanical engineering point of view. One of the things is the left out oil in the residual the cake is about 10 to 15%. Normally the producers claim, but it is much beyond that. 15 to 18% is the traditionally left out oil in the cake, and this to improve the oil yield, it will go for solvent extraction. But when we can bring it down further, solvent extraction bring it down to the residual oil to less than 1%, but it has its own problems. The solvent, one of the FDA regulations is we should not have the solvent present beyond 5 ppm. Whenever we consume a vegetable oil, our oil content, the solvent content of vegetable oil should not be beyond 5 ppm. Although today whatever the oil we will consume, we say it is basically 5 ppm, but it is always 20 ppm or something. But when we want to bring it down to 5 ppm, the capital cost will exponentially increase. For each ppm for the reduction, the capital costs are substantial, because it is so easy to remove the traces, solvent traces, unless you use high temperature separation and then distillation, and particularly when it comes to the oils, the solvent, when it is the high inflammable nature of the oils, the solvents, and then those things that comes, everything has to be handled at a very, you have to bring it to the room temperature, and then as the separation doesn't occur, so you have to continuously evolve the technologies which are very extremely costly. And now today, this 5 ppm has gone up to 5 parts per billion. So this is from, I think, the next 2020 or 2025, US FDA is going to introduce this particular regulation. So you can imagine what is going to be the cost of vegetable oils. So there are now various ways of looking at it. Like one thing is, can we not look at improving the yield of mechanical expelling? So whatever we have said, to my, particularly since 2004, I have been interacting with the vegetable oil industry as a part of a team where I was associated in the Institute of IICT. We were looking at that time, the technologies are stagnant. Mechanical expelling was 100-year-old technology. Nothing has, and majority of them were like the simple innovations that were done by the people who are not interested in the field of mechanical engineering. It is the subject of mechanical expelling was not understood properly. So what I thought is, like, there is a huge scope. Why people have not understood what is happening inside when the vegetable oil seed goes through expelling mechanism from one end of the expeller to the other end through the thing. Similarly, what happens when it goes into the solvent extraction? So these are the things what we thought is like, yes, when we understand at the basic fundamental level, when we understand then we may be able to solve the problem. So normally when I check with the people who are working in the field of, particularly the oil producers, they say 20 RPM is the one which I need to run the expeller. Then when I question him, why 20 RPM? He says, no sir, we have been doing it, we get whatever the yield that is possible, good yield. Then I said, have you ever done what exactly the vegetable oil is stored in the sea? What are the energies? What are the conditions in which it can give away its oil? When I started questioning, there is lack of understanding in the micro mechanisms of mechanical oil expression. If we understand, possibly we don't know whether we can implement a simpler, efficient technology. I just quote, because when I have one expeller for mustard, one expeller for groundnut, one expeller for karanja, why should I look at them? When I bring down the size, I can plot every material. Only parameter which I have to play around is the oil content. So when I started questioning the people on these slides. When these questions were not answered, then we started. I come to that particular part. What was the interest? So there is, in fact, when I presented this my idea, I'm just trying to tell the thing to the funding agencies where I went and defended my projects. I said there are, for R&D and engineering, there are two scenarios. One is mechanical expelling, what we can do as a mechanical engineer to understand the micro mechanisms of mechanical expelling, or the mass transport phenomena, and then what is happening. And then next is the alternate routes for like mechanochemical processing. So here the interest came from me from particularly the good amount of work done by the Russian group, Lomonosky group, where they say plant lipids can be brought through high energy reaction, high energy milling. So that is where we started off. So now I think I skipped this major project phase because this mainly I gave it to the funding agency So of course, let me tell a little bit about the recovery. I mean, high recovery expeller. So as I said, when we wanted to when we bring down the particle sizes to 20 micron or 30 microns, and I just hypothetically I am saying it. Why I am saying, I'll come to that little later. But when we bring, so then we can have a universal expellers. So this was the area we thought, like I presented as a to the funding agencies. Of course, mechanochemical processing as a offshoot of as a mechanical engineer in chemistry, I tried to sell myself to the funding agency that yes, I want to do in this area. I want to do in this area. This, please give me funds, because this is the area which can. So I mean, these are the activities which we planned. Okay, now let me tell you, when the first part, like R&D scenario of one, where the problem with mechanical expelling is that, as I said, residual oil content is 10 to 12%, which is on the high. But what it does is, this 10 to 12% you can bring it when the temperature comes down. When the expeller temperature increases to almost 140 degrees centigrade. 140 degrees centigrade expelled vegetable oil. Like for example, you have bought a groundnut oil pouch in the supermarket. You have to take it home. It has already seen 140 degrees centigrade temperature. Means it has seen one level of frying once already. So when you see this is the biggest problem when you look at the mechanical expelling. So when you want to bring down the temperature, it doesn't expel. When it doesn't expel, Gunny expellers, people say it is not cold expelling, but still 70-80 degrees temperature is still required. Kachigani expelling. And this is what we try to do as a prototype. What we try to do is, it is out of box thinking. Normally expellers are all horizontal. So what I try to do is, let me see what happens when I convert that extrusion into a vertical process. Because some of the vertical extruders have given extremely good results, particularly in terms of millage processing. Particularly the things what you see many in those, like all those ready to eat food products, like the kurkures, all those things. So many of them they come to, like when you do really the extrusion, particularly in your houses, when you do those those things, when you do the pressing, isn't it? When you do the pressing, and then it does those shapes and those things that come, and that is where we took the cube. Why not I apply? Because we use the moisture, and then the floor is there, and then we try to do, and then here we try to, maybe I can cool the barrel, and then so this is the kind of mechanism, but ultimately we make one prototype like this. But this is more, we wanted to take as a low cost expeller. I mean, of course, this is not a offshoot of what I have presented, but this is what I said. Like expellers, minimum expeller size is 200 kg per hour. But what we thought is, like, take the expeller to the doorstep of the farmer. So this is what we projected to the farming community, or those people, and we fabricated in-house, and then we used it for various applications. Now I'll come to the actual crux of my work, where what we looked at oil seeds. Normally, when I looked at the microstructure of oil seeds, the oils are stored in a small tubes of 2 to 4 micron diameter and 20 micron length. And this is where, and it is in a cell which is of the size of 100 microns. And this is why when I said, why 20 microns or 50 microns, when we do the size reduction, every seed particle, every seed will be same. This is exactly the reason why I said, when we bring the size of the particle to 20 microns, all cell walls are exposed, all bodies are exposed, and then they are mostly either cylindrical. There are different schools of the cylindrical or spherical. So when I apply mechanical force on the cell wall, the oil can expel out, and then And that is what happens in an expeller, or when you do the solvent extraction. Solvent when it is it percolates into the cell wall and brings out entire oil or entire along with oil several other impurities into the system. Or when you apply the simple mechanical pressure at 20 micron on the cell wall, you need, I don't require big amount of energies that for its expelling. So with whatever the simple pressures can we not expel. So especially the clue, the idea of the clue came from when we are when we do, say for example, put groundnuts in a mixie. What happens beyond few seconds when you run the mixie, immediately you will see the oil traces. Because the oil has immediately, you can see, so oil, it is started giving up its oil. So this is where, when we support the, when you do the comminution, the particle size reduction, and then when the oil comes out, and especially when the particle size is gone down to 20 microns, all the seeds, as I said, but one of the important difficult aspect is the protein and the starch inside the seed. This is where the problem has come. So when the existing mechanical methods have not dealt with the separation of protein oil bonding with the material. So what we thought is whether we can use mechanochemical methods where I have done particle size reduction, because particle size reduction at room temperature is very easy to conduct, very easy to carry out. Now when you want to, only thing is now I have to address only one simple problem, which is still existing problem with me, with my current invention, whatever we have done, is the separation of the protein and the lipid bond. The protein and lipid bond was the biggest challenge, although it has very simple, it's a van der Waals forces. They are not much energies are required, but the bonding that has been there has been pretty strong. And unless you apply temperature, that's why vegetable oil extraction is associated with accompanied by the temperature. Once we reach when the expeller reaches 140 degrees centigrade, oil comes out just like that. When it is not, until then it's only extrusion process that happens. So there is something which we need to attack is this protein oil separation. So this is what we address through our activity. So in our thing, what we have taken is a groundnut and the mustard as the seeds, and then what we used is there are various mills I have tried. Mostly our activity is centered around the multi-mill, where the particle size reduction is much easier. And then now I need to zero in now, because I am not a chemist. What really breaks the bondage between the protein and the lipid? Protein and the oil, or oil and oil, normal matter in Japan, and then oil and non-oily matter in the sea. So that oil and non-oily matter, the protein lipid bond, what is that I should use? What are the things? So we tried various additives. Let me tell you, physical additives, because it is a polar liquid, even the temperatures, even we try to use, in spite of being a polar liquid, we try to use the electro separation. Both the AC/DC, I took it to almost like 120 kV, 40 kV at that level. Whether something happens to break the bonds. So, but what we have seen is not much of the results. Among all these things, so we found aqueous ammonia is the one which gives good amount of breakage between the oil and non-oily matter. So then what we try to do is, when we did the particle size reduction, the simple next step was the solid liquid separation. Solid liquid separation, the solid liquid separation is limited by the solids presence in the entire solid liquid mass. So if the solid liquid, particularly centrifuges, if you want to do the solid liquid separation, if the solid loading is beyond 5%, I have not, I talked to many centrifuge manufacturers. Nobody has given me any centrifuge which can handle beyond 3% solid loading. This is one of the biggest intermediate step which we need to, as mechanical engineers, we need to solve today. This is a very important step, particularly for our process. And we did the simple thing of with our whatever the activities that we have done. Aqueous ammonia was found to be a suitable additive. Physical separation with G-force has not. When we look at the solid liquid separation, okay, let me see. We took we touched the limits, solid liquid separation limits in the whatever is feasible in the laboratory. We used 10 G-force to 1 lakh G-force. 1 lakh. We used small centrifuges in particularly the centrifuges which are used blood separation. Those things which are used, particularly our sister laboratory CCMB had, that the 1 lakh centrifuge, that centrifuge, I can use only 5 microliters. 5 microliters is the sample capacity, and then 1 lakh G-force, 80,000 to 1 lakh G-force I can apply. Still, the separation was only 25%. Means 25% is still left out. So you are laughing. So these are the problems that as a mechanical engineer we encountered. We tried as a bull. We tried to fight with the oil for the separation. So when we said when I applied ammonia, aqueous ammonia, I said like we found about 10 to 13,000 G-force, which is easily handleable and which is like we can do it. So this is the separation flow chart that we have applied. Like any other mechanical engineer, we also try to do some Taguchi application. So we try to do some, basically our parameters are particle sizes, soaking time, running time, and then the performance measures which we were looking at is the percentage oil left out in the cake or the free fatty acid content of the oil. So free fatty acid content, if the free fatty acid content, FFA content is low, it is good. So we try to optimize these parameters. So, but when we did, one of the significant parameters has come as the particle size. Second one is the soaking time. So then we try to improvise with another set of experiments. So here when we looked at, when we did the further optimization, some of the things which we come is like what we found is the percentage ammonia is one of the important parameter when we did the ANOVA analysis. And then normally with any of the vegetable oils, like with the particular process, the FFA content has been very comfortable. So finally we brought down the Taguchi array to particularly soaking time, running time and the percentage ammonia. Finally we noted soaking time is immaterial in our work. So basically when we saw the running time means centrifugation time, second is the percentage ammonia. These are the two parameters which we have which are the controlling parameters for the extraction of oils through particularly the mechanochemistry route. So these are when we particularly ammonia is such an obnoxious chemical. You can't even stand near when the reaction goes on. Particularly then when you are imparting, when you are soaking with the ammonia. So what is that? Then what is the next option? That we need to remove the ammonia. So then one of the things is one of the methods whether ammonia presence is there or not is the nitrogen estimation. Nitrogen estimation we try to do. So when we do the nitrogen quantification using Gerlach's method, we found that oil did not show any presence of ammonia, and then we try to compare with the mechanically expelled oil and with the various masses. Similarly, when we try to do, like here I am giving the sample 1, sample 4, you just particularly in the next few slides you try to compare the particularly physicochemical characteristics of the oil. If you see the sample one, which is a mechanically expelled oil, which you normally buy in the supermarkets, and the oil which comes in the sample 4 is the one which is which comes through our extraction route. So here, when we see the physicochemical characteristics are comparable, and the first important thing is the free fatty acid has come down to from 8%, which is not good for health. Free fatty acid content of the oil from 8% to 0.15% is comes through. There is a natural refining that is occurring in our process. Another important thing is the color. Normally, the first thing is whether we like it or not, oil is the color. So the light color, which is normally it should be below 2.5 units. So we got 2.5 units of color, below 1% of free fatty acid content. Then the saponification oil values all are very comfortable. Particularly the turbidity, but when you store the oil for a long time, particularly you don't use the oil for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, the turbidity that comes in, that is defined by the peroxide value. You see the peroxide value of the commercial oil is about 15.47%, but when whatever we have done is about 5.6%. So these are the important observations that we could make, and this is what exactly we tried to patent our process. And let me tell you, this process is very, I mean, like we have done at the lab scale of about 250 grams of seed processing, and now we are looking at this is a batch mode, 250 grams. Now my challenge will be to upscale it to 1 kg per batch at least, to handle, particularly to handle the G forces of 13,500 and minimum of 1 kg of the biomass mass. This is a big challenge right now we are facing. Today, because of solid loading is almost like 50%. Solid loading in the solid liquid material is 50% solid loading. So this is a challenge. I think it's a challenge, it's a problem that can be worked upon by young engineers like some of you who can come. If you want, you can share, I mean, like you can come to us, we can work together, and then maybe we make some prototypes in the components. So when we compare the samples of the fatty acid composition, particularly of the samples which are extracted from ammonia route and the other route which we expelled route, you can see whatever the standard fatty acid composition of vegetable oils are very much available in the same ranges what is acceptable in the thing. And this is a typical chromatograms which confirms all the components whatever we have seen. So as I said, in the process which whatever we have done, this is the challenge what we have. Challenge of upscaling it from 50 grams or 250 grams per batch to 500 kgs per hour. This is the scale. So you can see the order of difference. It is not, I mean, like it's a big challenge, and this is the challenge which mechanical engineers only serve. Let me tell you, this is a mechanical engineers only can take this challenge and take it to the next level. We have been doing it, I mean, in our institute, and this is not something which is, these are the challenges are posed to us by chemists. Now let me quickly rush through the small mathematical modeling aspects of our what happens inside the school. What we try to do is, first, when we want to do the mathematical modeling, you must define what is the flow. So what we try to do is the physical flow model. What we try to do is a screw expeller. This is a typical screw expeller. We try to do a normally water modeling experiments people say. We try to do oil modeling experiments. I introduce the dye and try to run the expeller with the dye inside and know what is the kind of flow that is inside. Physically confirming whether it is a laminar flow. So we try to insert, and then generally we can, without loss of much of a issue, we can assume that what we thought is like, we can assume it as a laminar flow. Then what are the mathematical models that we can apply? So what we normally, all fluid flow problems are done through combining the continuity and momentum equations, and I'll just finish in next 5 minutes. Continuity momentum equations, and these are the assumptions what we have done. And this is the, say for example, this is the press chamber. When we the material is entering from here, and this is the material out, and these are the boundaries that we have created. And then we try to do the analytical modeling, and simply through analytical modeling I came out with the expression for pressure. And when we applied this for both the barrel side and the this one, we found the pressures that are experienced by the material is of the order of as the distance from the end, it goes up to 10 megapascals to the 50 megapascals. Then this is what we say is, this is what is happening inside the screw expeller. So then can we not confirm with the computational fluid dynamics? So we apply computational fluid dynamics model. We use Fluent, and then normally like the surface map, all standard techniques that whatever you people follow as an engineer for modeling. We use tetrahedral cells and almost like total cell count of over 10 million. And this is my the computational domain. This is the expeller, and then the material that flows through. And these are the standard models of Euler and multi-phase model. That is what we have applied, and these are the boundary conditions we applied. And these are the pressure that what we have got at in the barrel. These are the things which we captured. When the shaft speed is at 20 rpm, for a throughput of 20 kg per hour, the screw experiences only 0.9 megapascals. And as the speed increases, 2.79, 10.3, and at 60 rpm, it goes up. I don't know why when the people who are developing the expellers, they claim 20 rpm is this thing. When I said, when we discussed, this is what the pressures what we have got is 0.94 megapascal. So that is good enough. But when we see the expelling at 60 rpm, you can throughput will increase. At the same time, the pressure experience is also very high. Your frictional forces increases. You can maybe there is a slight rise in temperature and then good expelling. But I don't know. Still, the industry runs in the very traditional mode. It's very difficult to change their mindset. So I try to oversell myself with the industry fellows, but I don't know what exactly. I'm trying to compare with the two different throughputs. This is what we try to do the experimental validation. We try to use the pressure transmitters, and then we try to extract the pressure information. That is how I got all the data, and this is how whether between the experimental data and the simulation results, how so normally what we thought is there is a threshold RPM beyond which the pressure developed is maximum. So what we noted is 40 to 60 RPM is the threshold RPM at which the pressure developed is maximum, and then the expelling can be maximum. But the industry still follows at 20 RPM. So these are some insights what we got. As I said, threshold speed range is the pressure maximum for a given throughput. So now let me tell you the final part of last maybe 3-4 slides which I tell you. And this is what right now at our institute we are trying to do as corporate social responsibility. This is particularly your alumni. I should thank Brigadier Ganesh, who has been the alumni of Usmania University. He has been the forefront of the championing the grassroots innovators in the particularly KP Telangana state. He was the one with whom we signed an MOU, and then we are trying to do what through his the walks across the various villages, identifying the grassroots innovators. He was trying to do. We came together, signed an MOU, and we are trying to give engineering interventions to the grassroots innovators who are there, who have no engineering background. But they have enthusiasm to serve. Like for example, recently there are some of Padma awardees. one person from Pochampalli last year, I think, he got a Padma Award for the simple innovation of bringing down the drudgery of his mother while doing the weaving. So these are some of the things which we are trying to do. So basically our idea is to promote grassroots innovators by giving the engineering interventions through the engineering evaluation of their design, re-engineering, value addition, drawing documentation, fabrication of prototypes, and fabrication of, and then passing on the entire package to the grassroots innovator so that he can sell his product with pride. So this is what we tried. This is our corporate social responsibility, and this is one thing which right now on my shop floor, a 5-speed till. This is a tiller. Tiller is nothing new, but present existing tillers doesn't suit the agrarian requirement. So a very enterprising grassroots innovator from the Nizamabad area, he came up with the idea of because the speeds at which you can drive, the amount of energy that is available for tilling, plowing the field and taking it to the field he was not sure, but whatever is available in the market was not suiting his requirement. So he came up with the 7-speed tiller, 8-speed tiller. So he came to us, we sat with him, we completely dissected the entire thing, then we did the re-engineering. We are now, this is the kind of prototype he made, and we re-engineered it, and then we tried to give him a prototype with all the engineering documentation. Right now, some of you, if you are interested, you can come to IICT, I can show you this prototype. I can tell you the challenges are enormous. I don't know how that man really, with his own money, he spent about 30-40 lakhs and then went ahead by designing it, because he has heart to do it. He went with his heart and then tried to develop the product, and then he was successful and he is trying to market. So we are trying to give him all the inputs. What is the load that is, the torque that is available at the tilling, what is the torque that is required for rolling, all those things we are trying to give it as a big package. And this is one very subtle, simple development. This is which reduces the drudgery of a brick maker. This is a brick making machine. Normally when a brick maker does, he does one brick at a time or 2 bricks at a time. When brigadier went and asked him, what is it? Sir, I can only do 300 bricks at a time, and I don't want my children want to come into the brick making. But then the question is, are there any methods that we can do multiple bricks at a time? So he developed a prototype, but he was having a cost issue. So we tried to use simple scissors lift. That is the thing which we developed, and then it is working. So we are trying to give it back to the grassroots innovator. And this is very interesting development. One Mr. Patan Saida, he developed a windmill. This is massless windmill, where normal windmills are a big. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your kind, encouraging thing. He said it's a massless windmill. The thing is the biggest trouble that the gentleman faced, Mr. Patan Saida, is this pump. This is the pump. This is the pump. Pump was. Everything was successful. What this is at a place called Nellur in the West Gopalapalli. Enterprising fish farmer and enterprising innovator came together and they developed this massless windmill. And it is for simply today the technique is to use 2 wires, put it a hook, and do the keeping of the energy and then run the motors. But this man come with use the sea breeze to run this one. But he was having it, sir.
And it will save the birds also.
It will save the birds.
Humans are killing lots of birds.
Yeah. So what we try to do is to give some engineering intervention. What we try to do is came with a material which can handle the seawater corrosion and the saltwater erosion. It was a simple cupronickel was the substitute to SS316 which he was using. Of course, cupronickel is slightly costlier than what is available, but it is for the past 1 year successfully it is running without. Otherwise, Previous one was he was having a difficulty. Every 5-6 months he had to treat this. So with this, I conclude my talk and thank you for your patient hearing.
There it is written, chemistry is nothing but the geometry of atoms. Geometry, understand it. He is talking about geometry. Thank you.
Please, sir, you have another 10 minutes. Because we are already running out of time. So I request, sir, please don't think otherwise.
No, it's okay.
So, on behalf of the ICT 2019 committee, I thank Sir Shesh Kumar sir, Dr. Shesh Kumar sir for readily accepting to invite a speaker. Today is very busy, but in spite of that, the commitment given by him, he came here and delivered the lecture. Thank you very much, sir. So I request Professor Krishna sir and Professor Chandrasekhar Reddy sir to felicitate the speaker with a shawl and a memento. So good afternoon again. So we have the second speaker ready. Actually, I should thank Bangar Babu sir for rescheduling his lecture from 2 to 2:45, accepting the request. Thank you very much, sir. And now I would like to call Professor Bangar Babu sir, head of the Mechanical Department, NIT Warangal, and my Guru in MTech on to dais, sir, please. So I would like to introduce the speaker. Sir is Professor and Head Department of Mechanical in NIT Warangal. He has graduated from Nagarjuna University in the year 1985 and obtained his ME from IIT Bangalore. He did his PhD from IIT Madras in the area of flexible multi-body dynamics applied to robots and manipulators. He has published more than 54 research papers in various national and international journals and conferences. Till now, he has completed supervised 8 PhDs. His major areas of research interest include flexible multi-body dynamics, vibration control, finite element modeling and analysis, mechanisms and manipulators. He served as a member and chairman of several preliminary design review committees for DRDL, RC and industrial. He was a resource person for many FDPs at several academic institute industries. He did consultant works for NTPC, Appliance Denison Limited, ABCast, ABHMEL, DRDL, and above he is a very passionate teacher. I know him when he starts SEM class, we are spellbound for the next month when we used to listen to his lecture. It's a continuous running the process. Sir, we are very much elected to have you in our international conference to deliver your talk, sir. Let I welcome you for your lecture. Thank you very much.
Emerging trends in mechanical engineering. Rather, it's when you say emerging trends, I rephrase it. What are the future directions of mechanical engineering? That's what I thought. Just I'm sharing my thoughts. Maybe it's a bit of fiction at times. What is going to be the future? So let us see evolution of mechanical engineering. When you look at, probably we can date back to the days of steam engine. That's the first evolution, first industrial revolution. Probably the beginning of 18th century. People exploited using the natural resources to convert that into mechanical energy. Initially it was a hydraulic turbine. Energy of water is converted to mechanical. Then that was used for the benefit of the mankind in developing some devices. Then the breakthrough invention is the steam engine. That's the starting for the industrial revolution. So you know what happens later. And probably the origins of mechanical engineering also goes back to that time. Then we have seen the second industrial revolution where we have the electricity. With that we got the electrical drives. The moment we got the electrical drives, we immediately adopted them and we introduced them to our mechanical devices. So after all, the mechanical devices make use of the available energy and perform the work that is required for us. in developing products. So electrical machine has become the major prime mover for our machines wherever the electricity is available, that is for stationary devices. When there is a mobility, still we were depending on the IC engine, that was a mechanical prime mover. So in the first industrial revolution we have the primitive automobiles, and then in the second industrial revolution we have the same automobiles with improvements. Then we have seen the third wave or the third industrial revolution. That's just probably some of you might have seen that. The previous century, middle of the previous century, third industrial revolution with, what is that? Invention? That is a computer. That has changed the things, the way it was happening till that time. So it has become part of the mechanical systems where we have seen the NC and CNC, and many of the things we can do the computations and we carry out the task by putting a small processor, a microprocessor within our machines. There's NC and CNC technologies, we have seen that. Then we are in the beginning, or I don't know, already we are in the fourth industrial revolution. You are aware of it? Probably it's going to be the history. Fourth industrial revolution, you might have heard, it is Industry 4.0. So what is that 4.0? What is the changing? How the change is happening? It is IoT, Internet of Things. So now we are in the fourth revolution. What is going to happen in future? How the mechanical systems are going to change in the days to come? It's a bit my imagination. I'm going to share with you in the coming half an hour or so. It's the pure imagination of a mechanical engineering professor thinking of the future by looking at the past and extrapolating things for the future. Already you might have come across Industry 4.0 is a buzzword today. Probably some of you people might have presented papers. What is Industry 4.0 that deals with? Have you heard of it? Industry 4.0. Cyber physical systems, there are the four components. Cyber physical systems, Internet of Things, cognitive computing, and just I wrote it down. Let me check it. There are four components. Yeah, it's a cloud computing. See, Industry 4.0 now when we say cyber physical systems, then IoT, cloud computing and cognitive computing. Just we'll spend a few minutes. What are these things? A cyber physical system. A physical system controlled from elsewhere. A system is controlled from somewhere else. It's a physical system. And then it involves IoT, Internet of Things. To control it, we need to make use of Internet. And then we have cognitive computing. What is cognitive computing? Just as looking at I was googling out to understand what is cognitive computing, and of course cloud computing you are all familiar. Cloud computing is going to change the way we carry out our routine things. Means cloud computing, I think it's a few words for some of you, those who are not very clear. It is not really the cloud. Today if you have a software, normally we install the software in a server, a copy is in the server, then we connect some systems, and we access the server, and then we will be using the processing we will be doing in the servers, which are in our laboratory. And for that we need to have a complete copy of the software. So here, when we say cloud, we are not going to have the software copies in our systems. The entire software will be on the servers at a central place. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, these people, they have big servers maintained in a safe place, and we will be accessing those servers through internet, and we'll be sending our data there and we'll do the processing and we get back the result. And whatever domain you are in, we'll be using this computer power. It's available at a central place. You will be sharing these resources with others. That's a cloud computing. And we have cognitive. See, this cognitive computing is something it's going to play an important role where we mechanical engineers have a role to play. Maybe I can give you a simple example. All of you know driving. Imagine you are driving a car. Now you see an obstacle in front of you. You observe the obstacle. Then you are going to press the pedal, brake pedal, maybe shifting the gear down. Right? So entire process, if you want to replace in an autonomous car, what will you be doing? See, as a human, we are sitting in the driver's seat, observe an obstacle in front of us, anticipate a distance, identify where we have to stop, do some computations in our mind, whether he is literate or illiterate, he will be doing all these computations. Then he will be pressing the pedal by exerting just the sufficient force to bring the car to halt at the anticipated distance. When we wish to replace this human driver with a autonomous system within the car, then all these computations need to be taken. What we do as humans, if we can replicate that, so we have the senses. Our senses will be observing what is there in front of us. There we have the LiDAR systems, light detection and ranging systems. So if the obstacle is there, it is going to identify the obstacle, at what distance it is, at what speed we are traveling. We need to do this computation. As a human, without doing all that, any calculations, we simply follow our senses and we apply the force. But as a machine, these computations involves data from the sensors and using the physical rules and do the computations, and finally it needs to control the mechanical device. Remember here the final control is a mechanical device. So the computations involved in the process, this other thing now we can term that as a cognitive computing. Cognitive skills. We normally use the cognitive skills to do that, but when you go for the autonomous systems, we have to develop such systems. And so these four are the major components in the Industry 4.0. So cyber-physical systems really one of the systems that if you give a capability to decide what to do and can be controlled from elsewhere. Here when you see the MC machine or CNC machine, we give a specific task, we specify this is what it has to be done. So you program it or the developer program, you load it. Then that's going to perform the task as long as you wish to do it. But here we will be giving a command from somewhere and it will be getting a drawing from somewhere, maybe from the cloud. Then it is going to decide the process and it is going to execute that. So this is what we are going to see. Already it is there in some places. It needs a primitive stage. So that is one thing we are going to see in the direction of manufacturing. And today we talk about, when we look at manufacturing, say it is digital manufacturing and distributed manufacturing. I think you are aware of it. Digital. So digital manufacturing is again a part of it. When you think of the cyber-physical systems, part of it is a digital. Then distributed. So we are not going to see the big industries what we have seen so far. Probably we are going to look at the manufacturing distributed at several locations and final product assembly might be going near to the consumer. So that's another change we are going to see. Then we can see the other part. Normally in my perspective, mechanical engineering, we have two broad areas. One is design and other one is manufacturing. And other thermal and other things comes under the supporting streams for the design. So in the design part, if you look at how we carried out the design 20 years back, how we are carrying out the design today, and how we will be doing that in the days to come. If you want to be competitive in the days to come, many of people have seen students here, we probably few points for them. To survive in the competitive world, what skills you need to possess? provided you want to stay to your core mechanical engineering. And one notion today, people say, so the future is only for machine learning, data science and artificial intelligence. It is, but those skills one has to a core engineering knowledge, he will be doing the one. He will be the successful one. Just knowing machine learning or AI or deep learning, unless you have some domain knowledge where you are going to use this knowledge. So one has to acquire proper skills in his core branch. Nowadays, there is one feel among mechanical engineering students that anyway we are going to migrate to other fields like computers. Let us not worry much about the core mechanical engineering. I advise you, first be thorough with your core mechanical engineering. Then if you have the additional skills, then you will be using all the skills in the mechanical engineering, then you will be doing much better than the other people. If you simply go with these skills, you will become purely an operator. If you have the added skills, then that must be an additional skill to the core mechanical engineering skill. So in this direction, I would like to say a few words where we add the additional skills like the AI or machine learning to our mechanical engineering domain. To start with, we have a design. Traditionally, when we do the design, we do the designs with hand calculations. Then we ensure the component is capable of handling the given loads. So then we make a drawing. These drawings, normally the draftsman, there used to be a trade called a draftsman. So when the engineer gives him all the details, he makes a beautiful drawings that will be sent to the shop floor. There the manufacturing takes place. But how many of you heard the name draftsman? The students? Even the trade is not there, even that has vanished. Instead of that we got a drafter, AutoCAD, computer aided drafting. So whoever feels CAD, simply if you learn the CAD package, you are simply replacing the positions of those draftsmen. Many times people ask me, sir, shall I go and take the training in CAD packages? Certainly you can take if you are happy to perform the jobs of a draftsman what earlier who is done. So that's the CAD. If you only know CAD, that's what you can do. Right? Now, later, what happens in the last 15-20 years? No such draftsman trade is there. Now what you are doing, the engineer himself is having a facility, a computer in front of him, making use of a package, any package, a modeling package. He is building the models and he can visualize the models, and so the design process has, the speed of the design process has gone up. And at the same time, he do not depend on another fellow. Normally, an engineer has to explain his concept to a draftsman so that the draftsman can come out of the drawings. That gap has started. So he himself can visualize and he can see the modeling techniques. Just I keep myself wonder for past 15 years how beautiful the modeling techniques have evolved. If you learn just using those models, not much. But if you can imagine a product and if you can create a model, you visualize that, improve it, then pass it on to your manufacturing engineer with appropriate directions how to produce, then you are using the system. Or even if you feel using the package, okay, I don't want to learn how to make use of this package, then you employ a fellow who is professional in creating these drawings, then you have to explain your mind to him, probably. That can be done. But one need to have the original imagination. But now these CAD packages are going to evolve into a new dimension with machine learning. Yes, the modeling skills are going to improve. Probably the modeling so far is a norms-based modeling. Once you go for solid modeling, I don't see any reason for us to continue with the norms-based modeling. Probably just only the surface cloud points might be doing that. Because finally, when you do these models, what we are going to do with these CAD models, we have to look at that. At present, if you look at the CAD model, first we send it to analysis. When you send it to analysis, what we are doing? We are sending this package to Hypermesh, where the meshing is done. Then we port it to the analysis package. some kind of FEM package, where we carry out the stress analysis. And then the same drawing will be going to the manufacturing for drying purpose. Probably when you think of the additive manufacturing, where the traditional manufacturing process probably might be changing at least in part. In such a case, do we really need the drawings or the formats of the drawing what we are using now? Directly, if my objective is to go for analysis and finally produce a product is through rapid prototyping or 3D printing. So I need to create a drawing that must be understandable to the 3D printing directly. And at the same time, the design part. Now, the analysis part, actually, those who are dealing with analysis probably might be looking at, many other times people look at optimization. What we do in optimization, unwanted material we remove. How do we know that some material is unwanted? Only thing in a particular region, when you take a component, you model the component, then you apply the loads, introduce the boundary conditions, identify what is the stress in the component. In some regions the stress is high, in some regions the stress is less. So if the stress is very nominal, very less, then in that particular region the material is not being used. Why do we keep the material there? So based on this philosophy, we have the structural optimization packages. OptiStrat is one of them. And usually here, without knowing what is happening, why it is happening, if you simply make use of the package by learning the package, what kind of result you are going to get, certainly it is very simple. One has to look at it. Maybe if you go a little deeper, what exactly is happening, so unwanted material is removed. And somewhere, we will be reinforcing if the cells are beyond the capable limits. So at some places we have to reinforce, at some places we are going to remove. That's what we are doing. Now when you look at let us keep this here, let us look at other direction where some developments are taking place. Now we are looking at RP with metal, rapid prototyping with metals, and it won't take much time for us to see rapid prototyping with alloys of our choice. So probably a direction what I am looking at in the future, for that where we can get ready to grab an opportunity as mechanical engineers is, when you have a component, usually the design is given by some imagination or aesthetics. When the design we create, that model we subject to analysis, and then why do we send it to another optimized protein? And the optimization fellow says, okay, remove material here, add material here. When I create my design to serve some purpose, what are the things we see? It has to transmit motion, it has to transmit force, it has to be good to appear, good to see, or that's aesthetics. It must be appearing good. With these aspects, when you create that, when somebody says you optimize this way, instead can we think of other means? Let us keep all our design as it is, and unwanted material, instead of completely removing, use a lesser strength material, a material of less quantity or lesser density or lesser property. Look at these, all the words I'm intentionally using. At some places, optimization is telling you remove it, and strengthen at some places. I don't want to change the shape. A beautiful design is appearing. Many times, if I see the examples, what people suggest, these are OptiStrat, this is my original design, this is a modified design, which is less made by this percentage. The material selling is this percentage. That's what people say. But for me, sometimes appears the original design is very artistic, with some imagination that was created. Just saying, some places the stress is well below the nominal. If I ask you to remove, that's because the decision is taken by a package guided by some principles. Whenever the stress levels are below this limit, remove these elements, remove these regions. In such a case, can we think for a future, maybe 10 years down the line, or 20 years or 30 years? But as mechanical engineers, we can prepare ourselves. Maybe designing a component, shape is decided, but I specify my material property at some regions. That's one of the direction I'm looking at, a possible direction. When I say this here, When I look at RP type, then I say RP machine. We understood how we are creating products with plastics. Then we are saying metals. Then alloys. Now these alloys can be used at the required locations at the required combinations. So they create strength. We can give the strength wherever it is required. Some reinforcing can be done. So these kind of devices probably will be looking at in future. So design, then looking at the capabilities of manufacturing, these are some possible directions. And another field for me, very fascinating field is automobiles, particularly autonomous vehicles. As I was mentioning previously, there are several challenges for us to tackle. And sometimes someone was mentioning, anyway autonomous cars are not for Indian roads, only for US and Europe. But certainly it will be useful for them. But if they will come here also, probably we can look at. See, many times we feel, as a mechanical design, when I look at design, when we have more number of constraints, we come out with the best design. If you look into history, the best designs have come only when the constraints are many. Even people also say, our performance comes out best when the pressure is right. A similar way, our constraints, if we can understand and pose them properly, we may not be able to use the technology immediately here. Probably that becomes a suitable technology elsewhere. Maybe that may be a better technology compared to Google. To my knowledge, there are two streams working in this direction. One is Google and the other one is Uber. But India, many times when people look at, when I pose this problem, they say, sir, many times we have a mental block mindset that we can't do these directions. Many times when people look at autonomous cars and look at, people have a mindset that these are the areas which we can't touch, it requires a lot of things. But in my opinion, there is nothing great in it, but only thing, whatever the difficulty in handling the problems are only in our minds. If we can remove that difficulty from our minds, and today, compared to 20 years back, everything is at our fingertips. If you have a doubt, Google is there to help you. I am telling you, success rate is 75% when I am having a technical doubt. To get a clarification for my technical doubt is 75% probability of success with Google alone. Other than Google now, Quora is also helping. Quora also we have some technical questions. Even if you post, there is a possibility to get your answers in few days or weeks. So that is not a worry. But what is the difficulty? Only thing, having a comprehensive view. Just maybe I will take just a case study like autonomous vehicle. What knowledge is required for us to devise and install an autonomous driver inside a vehicle? To take our position in a vehicle, what do we need to do? We have the sensors. Whatever the data we are gathering, because I imagine myself, I am sitting there. I would like to represent somebody in my place. Whatever I am doing, I have to assign the task to somebody. So we need to understand ourselves first. Whatever the sensory data we are gathering, for that we need to replace the sensors. Google out. I don't expect all of us to know everything at the day one or at the starting point. Google out. Sensors for distance identification. Give the keywords of your choice you are going to get. Then there are several devices, sensors available, and only along with the catalog or its manual saying this is the way it is going to get the data. If you want to connect the sensor to some other device, how to connect. All the interfacing techniques are available, details are available. Now this data is going to get. Just let us take only one simple thing. I was mentioning an object is there at a particular distance. We have to stop our car in 50 meters distance. 50 meters distance is an obstacle we identified. We are traveling at a particular velocity. Then we have to bring the car to halt in 45 meters. Do you know what knowledge is required here? This is the knowledge what you have learned at your 10th class level. If you have entrance examination of IIT Ramaiah. We want to come to a halt in 45. Yes, the distance is given, initial velocity is given, final velocity is 0. At what rate you have to accelerate? Then we need to go a little ahead. From here, if we need to accelerate, what is the force? So we need to bring down acceleration equals the force in the opposite direction. We have to generate the force. How we are going to generate the force? From where do we generate the force in a vehicle? The force that is required, first you have to see whether normally, manually you see with present experience. Feasibility, you have to test it now. How do you check the feasibility? How do you check the feasibility? What is the maximum force you can get for a vehicle? So usually, of course, probably I am taking a teacher student more. So let me tell myself. So once you have this, the maximum force you can apply depends on what you have to do. Then you have to go for braking in a. Many times people think many of the concepts, what we do as school children, we use now in a different form. If you are traveling in a bicycle at a higher speed and you need to stop your vehicle in a quick span of time, what do we do normally? Our common sense, if you understand, that was introduced and it was captured with a name ABS. You might have heard ABS. What is ABS? Anti-lock braking system. If you are riding a bicycle or a bike, you have used that. I don't know how many of you have met. Then the vehicle starts skidding. Immediately you release the brake. Then the obstacle will be there in front of you. Again apply the brake. That force, if you cannot get that force in a single go, then you have to think of activating your ABS. So the force is decided. Once you get this braking for this force, this has to be again transferred to the braking torque on the ground. Simple calculation. Force is coming from the braking torque. So it should stop its rotation. So if you look at all the calculations I am telling you, one by one you go till the force you are applying on the brake pedal. I give only one example. Like that, if you look at our experiences while driving a vehicle for 1 hour in different territories, many a times we take decisions based on the data. So if we keep observing ourselves and if we gather the data and our decisions, the same thing, based on this data, if we need to develop an algorithm so that somebody else on your behalf can take a decision. They are based on this data using artificial intelligence. That means whatever we do with a logical mind, that logic is created in a program, and based on that logic, you come to the final decision. What is to be done? Further, there are some, to make use of this, machine learning algorithms. Machine learning is just a simple compilation of set of algorithms. For different sets of data, these different algorithms will help us to come to a conclusion. And only difference here is most of the problems what we dealt in our daily life is either deterministic problems. Straight away engineering problems are look at deterministic problems. These are data, these are the equations, substitute them in the equations, you get a solution. But many of the problems are sometimes fuzzy. So for example, you are filling a glass. You have a glass in one hand and jug in the other hand. You are going to pour water. When you are going to stop? When you are going to stop? So that means here, that sensory data, we visualize where is the level. And whether we take a decision whether to fill half or full. That's the point here. So this way, the decision making is based on the preconceived notions here. Maybe if it is doing yourself. If it is in a situation, if the data is having incomplete, if the data is incomplete, then you have to make a decision. And the data is incomplete, or if there is no deterministic model, then making a decision based on this data, there comes the techniques of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So these are some of the thoughts, and of course we can continue, but there's people who need to do presentations. So I conclude my presentation at the juncture, but few persons If you have any questions, we can spend some time. 2 to 3 questions. Students, anyone? Now, only thing, maybe if you say if something is difficult, it is not mechanical. If you bring out that, I will tell you how can we see as mechanical engineers.
For automating a car, what are you doing not to have a teacher?
Not
To carry out education.
not to have a teacher. Actually, this one place, maybe traditionally, probably what you may be thinking different. I believe I am a traditional teacher. I never use the PowerPoints. I never use any presentation skills other than Blackboard. I never use either in my class or even in FDPs also. So most of the time,
That means you are still required. I said, how do you replace yourself?
only thing is replicating myself.
How do you replace yourself? You don't use Blackboard, you don't use anything, you don't use anything, that's good. But you are there. If you are not there, how do you deliver that lecture to me?
So only thing, sir, see the humans can be replaced only in some routine things, but not everywhere.
No. That's what it is. I am challenging you. You are trying to improve your machine. How are you trying to improve your being? Did you ever think that you can live for 200 years? Think about it.
Maybe it's only to reduce, see, not for our Indian conditions. One statistic says in USA, and there was some time back I come across a YouTube video. When look at autonomous vehicles, the need for autonomous vehicle, I think the keyword will give you that. He says some static numbers I don't remember. But actually, many times people commute taking about 1 hour a day in the morning and 1 hour a day in the afternoon. And there, people may not be able to even employ a driver. In such a case, the number of man-hours that is going waste, probably that's the time they can use it for the effective manner. So that's the reason why people are looking at that. And it's only there it's a manpower shortage. In India, I hope we never get such a situation. But Indian road conditions and environment, probably it will take a long time for us to get such a good systems. But complete replacement of a human, I don't expect in the near future. But several things, what we do in a normal way, routine way, can be passed on to a machine. But there are several things what we only can do. There was still, it is not legal, but there is a legal tangle with autonomous vehicles. A simple problem they could not resolve. Actually, when they need to finalize their programming, their legal rules are to be fed to the machine. Now, the vehicle is moving with an autonomous system, and it comes across an obstacle, a passenger is there on the road. There are two situations. If you apply the vehicle a sudden brake and then the vehicle is going to topple and the occupants of the vehicle are going to face injuries, maybe they may be no more. Or other alternative, the fellow on the road is in danger. So we have to choose one option. Manually we never have a time to think. But now something happens and we respond spontaneously. And either of them may happen. But when it is to be programmed, then the rule is clear. The vehicle, either the one in the vehicle is in danger or the one on the road is in danger. Which decision the vehicle has to take? If the decision is to be given by the legal people, the rule has to say. And when it is human, this kind of rules never come into play. Only later only they will question you why you are done like that. Until we get a resolution for such kind of things, it's going to be a big tricky issue. Anyway, I thank Sivaram Krishna and other organizers for giving me this opportunity to spend this evening with you. Thank you all.
So thank you sir for spending your valuable time. Without any IC tools you have conducted the lecture for 1 hour. it itself is a very challenging task because nowadays without PowerPoint or any other thing, people cannot deliver a lecture. But in this era also done a lecture in 1 hour, that's truly great, and that is endorsed by all audience. I see everyone is very interested. Thank you very much, sir. Now on behalf of ICT 2019 team, I would like to call our senior professor James Subramanian sir and Professor Chandrasekhar Reddy sir to felicitate the speakers.
So once